All right, we are live with another episode of Wellness Unplugged, my live broadcast podcast, and I am incredibly excited for tonight's guest because this is a very unique individual, and I have lots of interesting questions for him because he's got one heck of a story. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really love your intro, by the way. That was...
Yeah, and I'm going to work on the intro video there and see if I can get a cooler one. But we'll start with the countdown. We do already have a couple people listening, and so folks, if you have questions for Jason, ask them, and we can actually broadcast them live on the screen here. And Jason will be happy to answer them because I'm quite sure there's going to be a lot of curiosity around someone being a psychic and how do you develop this ability and whatnot. But Jason, how about I turn it over to you and let you tell a little bit of your backstory and maybe.
Yeah.
Because you're not only a psychic, you're also a lawyer as well as a podcaster, and you're doing a lot of good things in the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to let you know too. You'll be the first platform I'm announcing this formally, but I got signed with my best friend Megan Kane for our second show called Psychic Visions podcast.
Wow!
And it just got signed with Electrocast Media, and so it's been a major thing for us. And I can actually say that I'm a podcaster beyond just having it as a hobby. I still have the psychic and everything else, but it's just a really, just that kind of stuff happening right now. And I just thank God every day, overcoming cancer a couple of years ago, but going through the pandemic, like everyone's gone through. And I feel one of the ways I concentrated my efforts after I went through some depression, I feel like most of us have gone through in certain stages in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
Was podcasting, getting into the podcasting more. So I had a podcast before that. I took a step away from it for a short period of time when I had cancer. My first year, I started the podcast actually.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of really, appreciated the future. Going back to my background though, a little about me, I'll just make it short. I know. Basically, I've been a lawyer for over 20 years now. And I always had premonitions with my grandfather because he helped raise me. So my grandfather passed away in 2004. And as early as 97, I was telling people that when my grandfather dies, I'll be by myself with no one to console me. Well, that happened. He had a stroke, and I got to see him in New Jersey the day after his stroke. But then I had to go back to work, and my boss at the time sent me to Wisconsin to cover a deposition. And that's the night my grandfather died. And that's also the first significant spiritual experience I had because orbs of light came into the hotel room that night on his death. As I was about to collapse, when you think your grandfather just died, it's actually happening. And I am by myself with no one to console me, which was my premonition. Wow. I had these waves of unconditional love wash over me. And I realized it wasn't what I dreaded. My grandfather was there to console me. It wasn't what I thought originally. So it changed my whole paradigm on the afterlife. And in time, I became a medium that night. I went to Panera Bread to get food after my grandfather told me he loves me. And I felt this amazing unconditional love just wash over me. I went and got food. And one of my friends called me from high school. She's like, I heard about your grandfather. How are you? I'm like, I'm fine. Where are you? I'm in Wisconsin. What the hell are you doing in Wisconsin? I'm like, I'm in Baraboo, Wisconsin. I got stuck here overnight, and I got to wait to get back to Tampa. And she's like, oh, my God, your premonition. And next thing you know, I picked up on her grandmother who'd been dead 6 months earlier. So,
okay, so at 2004, you said you had this experience. How old were you at the time?
28. I think 28 because I was born in 75, so I think that made me 28.
Yeah, okay. And this is something that totally out of the blue, something you didn't really expect. And
scared me. I slept with the lights on for many years.
Okay, yeah.
I really did. I mean, I'll be honest about it. It scared me at first because I didn't understand how I could talk to Tracy's grandmother who was dead 6 months earlier or how I could pick up on my grandfather. And then it just started happening regularly after that. And over time, I just had to learn to accept it. It took an effort. It was a process.
Yeah. Did you ever wonder if you were crazy? Did that thought ever occur to you?
Not crazy. I knew in my family that we had some type of ability, I guess you could call it. Most of us have it, I think, but I was more attuned to it because of my grandmother. She had it, and she was part Hungarian Czech descent. So I think she was very spiritual in our family. So I always knew that there was something. I remember being a little kid telling my family I had deja vu moments as they're happening. And they're like, how do you have that? How do you understand that? I didn't, but I was vocalizing what I thought was my experiences, probably getting premonitions ahead of time or reading energy, whatever it is.
Yeah. So now when people find out that you're a psychic, what's the first question they ask you? Because I imagine there's ideas around this, because I picture actually maybe there's a spectrum of sort of abilities. People must, so I'll just let you say, what do people ask you first when they hear this?
It's always an icebreaker, no matter who it is, where I am, or what I'm doing. It's always an icebreaker. I've actually had that happen to me where I was at my best friend's wedding a couple of years ago in New Jersey, like 2018. And I didn't realize I'd be the informal entertainment for the wedding, but I basically wound up talking to everybody and reading everyone the whole night without even like making an effort of it. It was just everyone kept asking me questions. I heard you're the psychic. I heard you're the psychic. And so, yeah, it livens up my day. And I have a good feeling with it. It's always been positive. And so working with other people is always really cool. But yeah, it's fun. I'm doing a wedding this weekend, actually, on Sunday here in Tampa.
Yeah.
Halloween wedding reception. I'm working as a psychic. Yeah.
That'll be really, really sweet. So in your alternate life, you're a lawyer. Correct. And, is it anything like CSI? Or these, Boston Legal, or these shows on television, they sort of portray the legal profession in a certain light. And I imagine that in real life, it maybe looks a little different.
It's a lot more paper driven. The kind of I do insurance stuff. So I sue insurance companies for like hurricanes, disasters.
Okay.
Global warming makes my business work, but I'm so against global warming. I pray to God that we get rid of that issue so that I don't have to worry about having this kind of business in the future. I would rather us not have hurricanes and disasters and floods and fires.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. And the fact that you sue insurance companies. So you're like on the good side of being a lawyer, because sometimes being a lawyer comes with like a negative connotation, because we often think about criminal defense lawyers, for example, and maybe getting bad people off of charges. What are your thoughts on criminal defense law as a practice?
Well, one of my partners in Texas does criminal defense on the side, so I wouldn't say anything negative about it. Nonetheless, I would say more importantly than that, everyone's entitled to their own, defense of law. There's always bad things that happen to good people, and I believe the Constitution of the United States exists for a reason. And as a lawyer, I will say I'm very proud of our legal tradition where we can have somebody get defended and protect their rights. And if the state infringes on those rights, then there might be evidence that gets thrown out. It's part of our equal, having a more equal and fair and just system.
Yeah. Yeah, which is kind of like, I think, my opinion now. And in my younger, more naive days, I probably would have just thought all criminal defense lawyers were kind of like these paid off scumbags, maybe because of the way that movies portrayed or something like that. But I have another friend from many years ago who's also a lawyer, and he said, we need to make sure the police do their job and they're not overreaching and they're not, fabricating evidence, convicting the wrong people, and so on. And so, without criminal defense lawyers, you could have like massive sort of state overreach, and you could really descend into kind of a unconstitutional police state.
It would be problematic. You need the defense lawyers in order to balance out the prosecution. It's all about the scales of justice.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a system. It's not a perfect system. Look at the disparity, social justice in the United States. Most minorities, unfortunately, have to fear either being arrested or shot or killed, or I'm exaggerating some, but in reality, we have our problems. And I get so sickened when I think about our criminal justice system where people are being held right now on marijuana violations.
Yeah.
How many states legalize marijuana right now? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. The only way you could explain that is some type of elements of racism in our system. How else could you explain it?
Yeah.
It boggles my mind.
And I might be inclined to say that the minorities who tend to come into the country, many of them have come as immigrants, some legally, some illegally. That's not really meant to be a criticism, but rather to say, okay, they may have come in under more difficult economic circumstances. And I mean, I've lived in third world countries where economic disparity does lead to the poor segment of society often turning to criminal means, not because they want to be criminals, but because they feel like they have no other way. And so there might be people that are in prison that genuinely belong in there, or according to the law would. But if we were actually to look at sort of their human circumstances, we go, it's like the starving person who steals a loaf of bread. Should they really be put into prison when they're literally trying to survive and they don't see another opportunity?
It's terrifying to think about that. There's a lot. It's a lot deeper than what a show like this could talk about. Behind it, it could boggle your mind for a while if you really put your mind to it and think about these things, because I feel like they can really cause you to search your soul within yourself. I feel like there's a human toll to all this. Like, if you know someone's suffering, do you want them to continue suffering, or do you want to do something to help them? That's how I look at this. Like, why can't we help people? Why can't we just unite and work together instead of being where we're divided and constant? I don't mean to get on a tirade, but I get passionate about this stuff.
This is fantastic, man, because and I realize that, like, I think in some of these conversations I go beyond the original intended scope of Wellness Unplugged, but I think this is just going to happen organically anyways. I wonder if like, there's sort of an oligarchical class in the United States. These Uber billionaires, these tech billionaires, for example, that wield more economic power than entire sovereign states around the world, and something about that doesn't feel right. I'm kind of curious if you think that, like, using their sort of power of influence, they try to turn lower class people against each other, keep us fighting over minor things, so we're not distracted by maybe the stuff that they're actually engaging in at a very high level.
It's hard to speculate without knowing, but
fair enough. Yeah.
One of the things I'll say about it is there's a system that's in place that is going to have to get in some way upgraded, updated, more inclusive, just whatever way you want to look at it. We're trying to do that in the United States right now with the infrastructure bill that's going through Congress. It's stalling. It's going back. It's here. It's there. We don't know yet. It's like the invisible ink. You got to wait till it appears to see it.
Yeah.
I feel like there's hope. I'm always an optimist. I'm the optimist about the American system. I became a lawyer because I believe in the Constitution. I believe in our system of government. And right now it's been tested inside and out by forces of the January 6th insurrection and everything associated with that. But I think we're going to rebound okay. I think we'll be shaken for a while. I feel like as a country, we'll be able to get past a lot of this. I think we will.
As an outside observer, because I think for a lot of people who are not American, we look at the U.S. as a bit of an enigma, which it is as a nation. I mean, you're basically a bunch of tiny little countries, not tiny, but like you're a bunch of countries that just got stapled together. And, individual states have like such different personalities and characteristics. Like, look at Texas versus, I don't know, Maine, for example, like two just vastly different places. So the fact that you've held it together for this long is actually rather impressive. So there's something to be said for that. But let's shift gears a little bit, because of course I love that you answered in a very, let's say, legal fashion in terms of it's hard to speculate, right? That's a lawyer answering, because you think these things, you think your words through carefully, and that's a really good sign. You're a critical thinker. I want to shift back to the time that you got your cancer diagnosis. Because some people, again, they might think that, okay, here's someone who is a psychic, and I believe you said you actually had a premonition that this was occurring before you ever got a medical diagnosis. What was the first thought that went through your head when you realized this is going on and this is real?
Well, I was checking my reflection in the window, and it was that time of day where it looked like a mirror. And I was just looking at myself, not really just looking at my image. And I felt like, as I was looking at my image through the window, I was like, wouldn't it be weird if I had cancer and didn't know it? And it just resonated. It wasn't anything I said, anything I thought. It was spiritual in orientation, because when something comes in like that, and you just know it's something like that, there's no disputing it at that point. I had the feeling I understood it. So I went upstairs. I talked to my office. I saw my 2 assistants at the time. I told my family. And then 6 months later, I got diagnosed with stage 1 kidney cancer after my CAT scan. And it was pretty rough to adjust to that. So. So you have this premonition, but you don't have a medical diagnosis. The first question that comes to mind is, why is there a 6-month gap between the time you have this premonition and the time you come to a medical diagnosis? Does it have to do with the American medical system, or? No. I was busy. I was busy during that time frame, and I was getting a CAT scan for a surgery I was preparing to do for diverticulitis.
Okay.
And my doctor called me and said, by the way, we got to put that surgery off first because you got stage 1 kidney cancer. I was like, what? How did that happen? And the first thing you think of is, I don't even have a cancer in my family, really. That's what I was raised to think.
Right.
But then when I really went below the surface, everyone in my family's had some type of cancer. So that wasn't accurate. So it's like, you have to find within yourself the truths you heard that aren't accurate. You got to cure that and rectify it. But I did that, and I accepted that I had cancer, and then I had to get through the process. I elected to have surgery. So they took the tumor off my right kidney. And
and were you able to keep your kidney functional?
Yeah, it was it's called cryoblast. You know what cryoblast means? They took needles into my kidney, not to get too graphic. While I was passed out, like knocked out on anesthesia, they froze my tumor with precise, like you freeze a wart off your hand. They did something called the cryoblast, which has been around for 30 years. And so I walked out of the hospital that evening after the surgery because of the procedure. It's non-invasive.
Right. So then did you when you realized you had cancer, did you make some lifestyle changes, or was that kind of a wake up? Yeah. What sort of changes did you make?
I ended an 8-year toxic relationship that I was in. I ended a business relationship that was toxic. I went through several life transformative things, lost 50 pounds, became much more spiritual, dove into my podcast development more, became more creative. Then we had the pandemic hit, and that's when I got very introspective, started, meditating because we're forced to sit in the house all the time. I was meditating 4 hours a day. I forgave my dad, forgave my grandmother. Everyone's dead. I forgave them, though, from stuff in my life, and forgave others. And I let go of a lot of negativity. And I met some amazing people during that time frame. They're not in my life now, but there's some amazing people I met who were very positive inspirations in my life. And so all that stuff taken together was very positive.
Yeah. And so you mentioned losing 50 pounds. You kind of like glossed over this detail. Like, you lost 50 pounds. Like, that's not a small detail. That's a significant change. So what would you say contributed to, or what changes do you make that you think helped with the weight loss?
It was the decision that I realized that I had cancer. I was pre-diabetic. I had it was some type of, basically my body is toxic with everything I like to eat, such as, I have one right here. I'm not eating it, but it's a chocolate milk. I don't know if you can see it. Chocolate milkshake.
Yeah.
I froze it last night up the frosting. I doubt I'm going to eat it. I'm throwing it out. I've been eating all healthy keto stuff since I lost my weight, but I switched it. I started doing intermittent fasting. I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. If you ever feel like you're stuck on your diet and you're going back and forth, try intermittent fasting. My doctor got me into it. It's very positive. And you can basically burn your excess fat within yourself. Yeah. And that helped me tremendously. And I kept it off during the pandemic. I even bought an exercise bike. I don't go on as much as I'd like to, but it's a cool bike. It looks nice in my living room, but I go for walks a lot. That's really how I keep myself in shape. I do exercises and I walk and eat healthy.
Yeah. So, and how long did it take you to drop 50 pounds?
About a year and a half.
Okay, which I think is a really healthy time frame. Yeah. And it's funny that I'm like asking, some people who know me might think like, why are you asking these questions, right? Because really I'm about helping people achieve sort of transformative lifestyle change where it's not so much about the weight loss, but I feel like when we carry extra weight, that it's like a symptom. It's not really the root problem here. And I can't really prove a direct correlation, but I believe there's a really significant connection between the emotional stress, past stress, trauma, things that we carry with us that are reflected in the extra weight that we carry. And so it's like you mentioned, going through and like forgiving people and resolving some past relationships and things like that. And I think letting go of some of that emotional baggage gave space to let go of some of this extra, maybe you could even call it protective weight that you were carrying.
I agree with you 100%. I think it was part of the process. It happened on its own, like at the same time, in a way. I lost a lot of the weight first, and then I started going through the emotional part. And forgiving actually helps you. You don't have to run to go get a milkshake. If you're forgiving somebody, you're not going to be sitting there, wanting the Twinkies, wanting whatever sweets. And I've been there on 9/11. I ate 2 sandwiches out of stress, I remember that. People were looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm comfort eating right now. I don't know what else to do. That's what my family did. We comfort ate, single parent family. So.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned like you have Hungarian heritage, and I know Eastern European countries went through a lot of difficult years, even through the last century, where we were sort of moving into periods of economic prosperity, and so food is often used as a symbol of sort of hospitality, of love, of care, and so we developed this really strong emotional connection to it as a result. And the other thing is, it's cheap. It's like the most readily available like antidepressant out there.
You're right. And look what it can do to your body. It destroys it. I remember my triglycerides, metabolic syndrome is what I have. Yeah. But I reversed it with my weight loss and my dietary stuff. But I remember I was looking at my triglycerides once in Texas. I went to one of those weight clinics when I was like 230 pounds at that time. I wasn't at my heaviest, but I was at 230. And I'm in Texas. And they give you that where they do the prescription with the weight, the appetite suppressants, and they measure you each week or whatever. I went in to get the blood work done, and the nurse comes back and she has a huge circle on my number. And I think normal was like 400 or something. And mine was at like 1950. Wow. And they were like, and the lady said, and the nurse said to me, she's like, yeah, we just had a law enforcement officer with a number 400 less than yours. And he had died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago. Because of his, triglycerides being so high, it causes clogging, it causes heart disease, it causes sudden heart failure. So that kind of stuff happens. And it really shook me. But it still took me several years to get past all that. And it was the cancer that finally really shook me up. I'm like, if I'm going to survive this and go through these surgeries and deal with all this psychological stuff, emotional stuff, spiritual stuff, I'm going to get my body in order, because this is the vehicle in this lifetime. If I don't get this in shape, what am I going to look for?
Yeah. And that's, it's so interesting. And I appreciate, I just want to also say, I appreciate your openness and your vulnerability and your willingness to share, because I think that really adds value to conversations like this. We get to see the real humanity of it, because very often people will see us at this stage in the journey and go like, wow, I really admire you for getting to this place. But it's like to be able to see the sort of messy imperfection that we go through to get to here is really quite something. And I will say, I'm also a fan of intermittent fasting. I think it's a valuable tool. And I put one caveat in there, and that is, if somebody finds themselves in the place where they're trading fasting to eat junk food, basically, you're then fostering a healthy relationship with food. But for me, I felt like fasting helped me to break sort of this emergency feeling I had around hunger. Like, I feel a twinge of hunger, I must eat. It allowed me to sort of become a little bit more resilient in the face of hunger, and not necessarily treat it like an emergency. And then there's tons of additional benefits from like autophagy and sort of breaking down old cellular material, recycling.
I found? I'll tell you one benefit I found. From intermittent fasting. Like when I was doing it hardcore, like take 3 days on and 2 days off.
Okay, that's hardcore. Yeah,
I got extra psychic, intuitive, spiritual, more connected. My readings are even more efficient, because the body is getting rid of that stored energy, and it's not bogged down. It becomes more efficient. So I feel like you become more spiritual because your energy is not bogged down with the calories of crappy food. That's the way to say it, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that has to work to break down isn't there. It's breaking down your excess fat. So you become more efficient as a machine overall, even spiritually.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people mention when they take up fasting, they feel a greater sense of mental clarity. And it's really true. Like, there's like no, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but there's really no healthy amount of junk food in someone's diet. Like there's never a time where junk food is actually positively contributing to your health.
True.
And that's kind of a stark realization to come to. Now, I'm not saying that I don't ever eat junk food, but I eat it with this awareness that this is really doing nothing to serve me. Right. I'm purely choosing to eat this because I want to feel the pleasure it can offer me in the moment, or I feel like I have to eat something now because I haven't eaten for X amount of time or something like that, but there really is no healthy amount. And it kind of points to some of the socioeconomic problems that we do see in our society, where people who don't have as much money, who struggle with making ends meet, that this is the stuff that they can afford. And then, so they're the ones that are suffering with the greatest degree of sort of crises of health as well.
It's insane to think about it in that respect, to think that our system, our economic system, our socioeconomic system, where we live, who we are based on our race, it also dictates what our diet can be like, based on stores in our walking distance of neighborhoods in inner city or urban areas where you don't really have the ability to go to other, go to a Whole Foods. You're not going to, it really can affect your entire life. It can affect your quality of life. It can affect everything.
It becomes a real downward spiral that is difficult to get out of. And we know that like sort of different races have different genetic predispositions. The indigenous people here in Canada, typically they have a lower tolerance for alcohol, for example. And so there's certain stereotypes that get associated with them. But if we actually look at like their genetic makeup, they legitimately have a lower capacity for handling something like alcohol, for example. If you look at African Americans, they might have a greater predisposition towards heart disease because they don't process sugars quite as well. Things like that, and it's like, I wonder about initiatives like setting up community gardens or what you live down in Florida, and do you get year-round sunshine there? Like, what's the coldest it gets there?
It's beautiful right now. I don't mean to make such triviality of it. It's like in the 70s at night. It's beautiful. It's like gorgeous.
So could you pretty much garden year round down there?
I live in a condo, so I can't garden anywhere. But if I had the yard, I'd have a garden.
Fair enough. You could do one of those indoor garden tower gardens.
On the wall, kind of like, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I've been super curious about those. Yeah. So, but then again, those are expensive, right? Relatively speaking, it's pretty expensive to get these sort of hydroponic special light, they're like, $250, $300 or something like that to sort of grow your plants. So, but I wanted to tap a little more, ask a few more questions kind of around the psychic ability that you possess. Is there a range sort of psychic ability? Because undoubtedly you've connected with other psychics in this process. So because some people might think again that being psychic means one thing, like you can somehow perfectly see the future in crystal clear detail, and so is there like a range or degree that comes with psychic ability?
It's interesting because when I tell people I read energy, I try to simplify it so people aren't so like, oh, what does that mean when you call yourself the social psychic? And I say, you know what energy is, right? Right now we're sitting in front of a monitor on a call on this streaming software, and we're having a great chat. It's all fueled by energy, and we're made of energy. So
Yeah.
how is it any different that I can read someone's energy either through a phone or computer or text message? It doesn't matter. It's just reading energy. So I can tune that in. So that's how I simplify it, because I say I just am more receptive. And I think most of us are, though. I think if you have spiritual awakenings, you can become open and perceptive. And I think that's what happened to my grandfather. I think he just opened me up to some latent, psychic ability I didn't realize I had. And then it took me about 10 years to work through that process. And it wasn't until 2017 that I started my own psychic thing, so publicly. And then my show was a year later. So when you think about it that way, it took me many years, 13 years.
Yeah, because that was one of the questions I jotted down here was, do you think that most people have this sort of intuitive ability within them, but most of us, and I'm like, now this sounds conspiratorial, but I'm like, I wonder if like people would like to suppress our ability to tap into it, if powers that be would, that's just a curious speculative question at this point.
I'll say this. I think it has to do with how we view the world and what we make of it. Because when you think of the world as this bizarre place that has, set rigid guidelines and orthodoxy created by our world religions and all our, the way we're raised, right? We're not raised to understand what psychic means, or we're not raised to think of the afterlife as not a scary place. You don't have to fear death. We don't die. We stay on. We're 99% energy. Our bodies are our casing. That's how I look at death. From all the people who have come through from the other side to communicate with me during readings or just in general, including my grandfather, like we cross over. We don't die. It's like going to camp back in the 70s when we didn't have cell phones or the readily availability of Zoom calls. Like, you have to think that your relatives on the other side, and they're there and they're watching us. And there was ways they can communicate to us. They can communicate with us. I call it spiritual Morse code, but synchronicity. If you think of your loved one and all of a sudden a song comes on the radio that you realize has to do with them, that's a strong connection. If you have a dream and you wake up and it's 555 or it's 222-111, angel numbers, that's the way they communicate with us.
Right. Okay. So then, do you, or could, some people might be like, can you predict accurate details like lottery ticket numbers or something like that?
I don't do lottery. I don't do lottery. I don't do my best friend's been asking me forever to do cryptocurrency. And I said, you know what? I can't do that. The only thing I'll tell you about cryptocurrency, I say all the time, get out of it while you can, because at some point it's going to crash in the future. I don't know if it's 2022 or when, but I feel the energy of that. I don't use it for that kind of stuff. I use it for other things, theories behind trying to find missing people in cold cases from many years ago, helping bring peace and closure. I helped find a missing dog in New York State 3 years ago on my couch in this room. And predicted that dog would be found the day, in a day, and it was, and everything else like that. I had a show on my episodes, one of my episodes that year features that. But, there's just different ways of looking at it. We all get premonitions. We all get spiritual experiences. There is not one person you're not going to talk to that will say they don't believe in spirituality, because we all have it. We all have vivid dreams with deceased loved ones. You just got to believe that and understand it and know it's not crazy.
So then, how would you maybe address someone who would be like, let's say, an atheist who doesn't? Well, an atheist doesn't necessarily believe in God, but someone who's like aspiritual. In other words, they don't believe in any sort of, like, that we're just basically these electrical beings that are going to die and go back to dust.
I respect whatever they have to think or believe. We all have our freedoms of thoughts, and my thing is the way they believe that. I exist in a spiritual world every day. And the things that happen to me, I can't explain, but to accept it, it is what it is. The synchronicities that happen, the experiences that occur, it is what it is. I just don't know how else to explain it. So if someone's not spiritual, then the only thing I'd say is, if that's what makes you happy and you're happy with your life, do what you got to do.
Yeah. Okay. So now, you've mentioned sort of sometimes using this ability. Do you ever use this in your legal practice? And does no.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I've been asked this many times. The reason I don't use it in my legal practice is because we have strong ethics rules as attorneys. And one of those ethics rules, there's none of them that talk about being a psychic lawyer for a reason. They don't anticipate that if you're a psychic, you would use it in your legal practice. So I keep them distinctly different. I don't put my psychic hat on until after hours. I actually literally trained myself that unless it's 6 o'clock, I don't do anything with psychic stuff until after 6 or on weekends. Same thing with my shows. So the lawyering stuff occupies my daytime hours and removes my priority.
That's a really interesting, because I was going to ask if you could sort of switch the ability on off in a sense.
It's like having discipline with, you can't smoke indoors. I'm not a smoker, but I'm saying
Sure.
you have to be disciplined. So when I'm doing I've been blessed too, because I've been able to have my show, do my psychic stuff, grow it slowly, but not have it blend into my real life day job where, people I'm practicing law. I mean, actually there are a lot of lawyers who know about me that I practice with, but I mean, clients, I don't share any of that with clients. I don't talk to anyone on the other side about it, meaning the legal side. I keep it out of things. I think there's a time and a place for everything.
Do you suppose there would be people who might have this ability who would use it in an unethical way?
I'm sure people can do whatever they want. I mean, I'm shocked to see what people have been doing during the last 18 months or whatever it is. I mean, our human spirit's challenged right now. Yeah. The good thing is there's a good side of the human spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I say that I've never met a remarkable person who's had an easy life, and maybe because people would then wonder, well, why do hard experiences happen to good people? And I'm curious what your thoughts would be on that.
Resiliency, because it's not good people or bad people. Bad things happen to people, but you see resiliency in the human soul and the spirit of what we can really overcome. I had a show earlier. You might have her on your show. Carolyn Rose came on my show, and she's a 4-time cancer survivor. And she survived cancer from like 11 years ago, and she's still in remission. And she was so inspiring today. And it just made me think, because it's Cancer Awareness Month right now. And it just, I almost got emotional during the interview because it gave me flashbacks of my own diagnosis. But then I thought her strength and her courage and her fortitude. I'm just thinking to myself, like, this is the human spirit right here on display. Like, this amazing person is an example of human spirit that you can really look at with such resiliency and respect.
Yeah. So then do you wonder, let's say somebody does get a cancer diagnosis and they kind of just accept it, like, I'm going to die. Does that sort of, put them in a situation where they're going to have a lot more difficult time, let's say, fighting it versus those who say, I'm going to beat this?
I do believe heavily in willpower. I believe heavily in mindset. My mindset, my willpower was challenged during those 3 months. I can tell you that. The first month, I didn't know if I had stage 1 or stage 4 because I had to get the MRI ordered to verify. So for 3 weeks, I thought I was like the living dead walking around, like didn't know what I was doing. And then I felt guilty. I felt like I was supposed to like stay inside because I have cancer. Like, what do you doing anything? It's not affecting my mobility. But it affected me psychologically. So I was depressed and I didn't even realize it. And then I got out of it after I got the treatment and everything. But I was so grateful. Yeah. I was grateful that I got diagnosed and had the procedure before it got bad. That even though that's not the most progressive type of cancer, it's like when you have it in your body, and the fact that I got that diagnosis 6 months after I felt it in my own body, psychically, it was like spiritually, energetically, whatever you want to call it. It was one of those experiences. It's just, it sounds out there when you explain it, but when you experience it repeatedly with spiritual experiences, like I go through on a regular basis, you just accept it. You just accept it.
It was a growth experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is absolutely fascinating. I'm just looking over my list of questions here to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Interviewer, by the way, man.
Do you ever wish that you didn't have this ability?
No, I love it. I love it because, I mean, I just have a new show I'm going to be doing about psychic visions with my best friend, and that's something I get to work with my best friend now. Yeah. Right? How cool is that? To start a company with your best friend? Like, I can't describe that like opportunity. Like, I love being a lawyer, but it's also nice after going through the pandemic and being restricted for so long to be able to put your life dreams into focus and try to live that. And I'm actually having that opportunity right now. So I would never regret any ounce of this. I love it.
Yeah. Which is amazing outlook on life. Does this ever drain you if you, let's say if you employ this ability, do you ever find that it drains you emotionally, mentally, or anything like that? Or,
that's a great question. I'm going to tell you 2 things about that. One thing I have neglected to say is when I do readings, I love being able to work with my clients, and I'm not minimizing that in any way. But I'll say this: when I'm tired or when I'm like exhausted, I will let my clients know, like, hey, I need to reschedule with you because I'm only going to do a reading when I'm 100% in my bed. I want that to be like, So if I'm tired or I have a headache or I feel drained, I'm honest with my clients. Like, hey, look, I have to reschedule this. I'm not feeling well right now. I don't do that too often, but I have to pace myself because if my legal day occupies significant periods of time, so I don't overdo it, and it can be draining. It can be. I remember my first weekend I started giving readings. I remember I did like 10 in 2 days. And I remember after doing that many, I didn't realize that you could do that many, but then you got to pace yourself because when you do 10 in 2 days, it was the Super Bowl weekend of that year too. You just can't, my neck was all like, in pain, and I was exhausted for like 3 days after that. So you got to pace yourself.
Because I wonder if, in a sense, it's like you're giving something of yourself. You're expending some of your energy for somebody else. Because I kind of even find this in coaching. I love what I do. It's clear it's why I do it. I'm extremely passionate about it. But I know that if I've had 5 or 6 client calls in a day, like I'm spent. Because I'm giving a lot of myself, and it's hard to explain to people who don't understand. But really to help people overcome some of the struggles in their life that they're facing. And it's not that I can do the work for them, but there's still an element of myself that I give in this process.
It's your time and energy. There's an energetic exchange that happens when you are meeting with anyone and doing light work. You're doing light work. That's how I look at it. Light work, people who bring light to someone's life, clarity. That's what I love. I love when I have an opportunity to offer clarity to somebody. And one of the other things I want to share with you, when I went through my cancer and all the other turbulence I went through, actually the readings are what gave me a bedrock to rely upon. Because when I had readings scheduled, I went forward with the readings, and it was helping other people who have dealt with death from cancer, helping other people have cancer diagnoses. It was like the synchronicity of the people coming in front of me for the readings during those time frames was it was too much to even ignore. It was like I was being given counseling through the readings I gave other people. By what I channeled to tell them was actually inspirational for myself. So it was like a double layer of guidance from the universe.
Okay, so this one's going to be a bit of a maybe a bit of a tough question, but you've stated that really you feel that death is nothing really to be afraid of, but when you're confronted with your own mortality, there's certain feelings that arise that you have to kind of face. How do you reconcile the two?
I do it every day. The fear of death versus the fear of, like, I guess you're saying like the dangers of the world, to understand your question?
Not really. Well, maybe I could rephrase it because I know it's a bit of a tricky question that I'm trying to articulate here. People are afraid, like many people are afraid of death. We sort of have this primal instinct within us. It's a survival instinct. We all possess it to some degree, where it's like we want to stay alive. We want to be in this plane here. But because I remember, like, I've been confronted with my own mortality a couple of times as well, and it does like freak me out. It freaked me out a little bit when it happened because I don't think I was really prepared for that. And maybe as we get older, we get a little more. I'm about 10 years behind you, I think, but I'm 39 going on 40, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not really okay. There, okay. I spotted you a couple bonus years. Oh, that's right. You are 7 years ahead of me. You were born in 75. I'm born in 82. Yeah. But it's like there's sort of a shift happening where I'm starting to sort of be more at peace with it. Not that I'm wanting to wrap up my life anytime soon. I got a 7-month-old son. Like, it's beautiful. I love, thank you. I love being a dad. But at the same time, I'm also 9 to 40. And if you look at average life expectancy, like I'm kind of halfway there. And so
I know you're about the halfway mark is like, what? You mean in 30 years, I'm going to probably be my life expectancy? How does that happen so fast, right?
Yeah.
I like your question. I want to answer it. And I think I understand it better now. The fear of death, I tell people not to fear death because I want you to know that there's no way I can communicate with deceased loved ones since 2004 and have it happen all the time and have it happen with accuracy. I have Google reviews. You can read them. Like 91 5-star reviews. I don't talk that up usually. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for that, because there's accuracy to stuff that comes through when it happens. And when it's meant to happen, you don't control the information that comes through as a medium. So I always tell my clients, look, if you're coming to me and wanting to know what does your grandma's recipe from 20 years ago and she's gone the last 15 years and you want to know how do you get it, I'm not going to be sitting there trying to come through for that purpose. I'm not doing that. It's about clarity. It's about healing. It's about having larger understanding of things and really being able to rectify issues within yourself. But I'm not a professional. I advise people, mental health awareness, go see a mental health counselor. That's another thing that happens though. Yeah. People will come and want to see me in place of or in lieu of a mental health professional. I have to tell them I shut down readings when I've delayed readings from people who just had someone pass. I tell them it's too soon to have a reading with me. You may want to wait at least 6 months or so. I don't recommend it this recently. I think you should see a grieving counselor and you should talk to them yourselves. You can communicate with your loved one. You just got to be open to it. And I try to tell people kind of like, you don't have to be relying on calling someone like me all the time. Like, you could do a lot of this yourself. There's an empowerment thing to this stuff.
That's really interesting. And I think I want to commend you on how ethical you are in terms of your approach to all of this work. Because I don't want to say that I'm cynical, but I've kind of, I've seen both sides of sort of humanity and the direction it can go. And so I can just see how somebody could maybe possess an ability like this and use it in an unethical way. And you seem to operate with like the absolute like height of integrity in this. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I think it's so important to understand that I love that you also are okay with communicating your limitations around this, or maybe the limitations of the work that you can do, because I imagine there are people who feel like, I have no solutions for these problems and you're my last hope or something like that. Do you ever have conversations like that?
That's a lot of pressure. Yeah. I've had moments when I first started out as a psychic where I gave readings to someone who was grieving their son who committed suicide, where they went up north to try to go to the Long Island Medium show and try to get an audience with her. They weren't able to get through. And then the husband reached out to me and I was able to connect them to their son. And I started crying during the experience because we're on a phone call for an hour. And I was nervous. It took me 5 days to call them back because I get nervous, even though I know I'm a psychic and I enjoy and love what I do. And I know I'm most confident being intuitive psychic in a medium. This is what I exist for in certain ways, right? I was nervous calling them back because I felt so bad that I felt that energy of, it made me emotional. It makes me emotional now thinking about it. Like, I connected them to their son and it was an hour of that. And coming up with details like the woodshed, or coming up with details like the person who, when they crossed over, their greeter is the older woman who watched him for the first 7 years of his life. He called him Mima. And I came up with that word, and it made the family, like the parents were freaking out when I said that, because that was her best friend's grandmother that watched him, and that's who greeted him on the other side. So they know he wasn't alone. They know he's not suffering. They know he didn't intend to kill himself. It was an accident. He hung himself, but he really didn't think he was going to die. He thought he was going to pass out and get found, and that would be his cry for help. He dealt with depression. Wow. I told them all these things, and it resonated with them. So there was closure, but that was an emotional exercise for me. That was a Friday afternoon. They wrote me an email on Sunday. It took me 4 or 5 days to get back to them because there's an emotional toll to all this. People don't think about that. Even being a psychic medium and knowing this every day of my life, I love what I do. There's an emotional toll. When I get experiences like that, I love it. But afterwards, I feel just emotional myself because it's real life situations. You think about your own family. What would happen if your brother committed suicide? How would your parents be? Or how would it be if you try to communicate with your parents after you died and you're trying to come through and you don't know how to do it? And so it's a lot. It's something.
Because there's just elements of life that are outside of our control. And I think one of the ways of being able to kind of live in peace is to make peace with that reality, that there are things that are outside of our control. And that's just a part of being in this existence. So how do you recharge your batteries?
Meditate, go for walks, see friends, family, do podcast episodes. Actually, I have to say, being creative has been something that I found during this pandemic within myself that I never really understood before, because being a lawyer, you can't really be creative as a lawyer. Really, there's not much room there. And I don't think people would want to hire you as a lawyer to be creative. They don't care about my shows. So this is something that I've gotten to do at this stage of my life. And it's just been something I can't, I'm so grateful about everything. And I love having opportunities. When I overcame my cancer, I made all the life changes I made. I feel like I'm on a renewed lease on life. So I always try to, I deal with mental health issues. I deal with depression. I get through it. It's hard. I don't think any of us going through right now could not discount how bad depression and anxiety and all those things can be to us. And you just have to understand that we all go through those things. It's normal to be depressed right now. And so it's okay, because we're going to get past these things and then we'll be able to live a better life again. But there's processes involved.
Yeah. So what gives you hope for the future then? Because we're going through a really difficult time right now, and I don't think it's outside the realm of how do I want to phrase this? I don't think it's crazy conspiracy to think there are some nefarious forces in play at this present moment, because it just seems like those who would have nefarious intentions, like this situation is rife with opportunity. So what gives you hope moving forward?
It's interesting you ask that question, because just recently when I was on one of my walks, listening to my music and walking, I'll get premonitions, and premonitions I'll get, like last year in June of 2020. I was walking one afternoon and I had the premonition that it was a news program. And I actually saw a clairvoyant image of a news program showing the map of the United States for the 2020 election. And I wrote about it on my Instagram, and I said that Biden would win and get elected president, and he'd flip 5 states. And I predicted all 5 states in accuracy. And I predicted that the House and the Senate would go blue, but I didn't predict that it would take. I was wrong when I said I thought it'd be like not a landslide, but I felt like it was a much more definitive thing. And it took that much longer, of course. But, in our American system, yeah, we're on the teetering on the edge of who knows what could happen if we fell in the abyss. But the one thing I look at for shining hope is when you look at the election last time, there was a big enough margin of Americans who voted for Biden over Trump. That makes me realize that no matter what happens in the future, there's always that truth, and you can't change the truth. The truth is what it is. You can create untruths to try to balance it, but in reality, at some point, that's not going to work. So I have enough confidence in our system. I also feel like the pandemic's going to wind down in 2022, going into the spring. I think we'll see a little surge in the winter, and I feel like it's going to taper off. And I feel like that's going to be something that's going to help a lot of us, especially internationally. And I think that we're going to have a renewed focus on things. And I think there's a renaissance for spirituality right now. I think people want to know about the life beyond here, or they want to know bigger things like self-improvement and how to become more active listener or intuitive or empathetic. All those things are intermixed. Personal development.
Yeah, we've kind of been we've had many things kind of ripped away from us in a sense. And again, we might treat that like it's a bad thing. And I certainly don't want to diminish or downplay the hardships that people have experienced during this time. But again, I think about the difficult experiences. They're the things that make us reflect on what matters most to us in life, and really can kind of create a monumental shift in priorities. And so it's not trying to polish a turd, but it's, there's an element of, in these difficult experiences, what can we take from it and draw from it in terms of growth, and say, okay, here's what I choose to try to make, basically out of this situation here. Man, this has been a fascinating conversation. I could just ask you questions all night, but I also respect your time. I know it's a bit later for you there. And I really appreciate you.
You know what I'm excited about? I'll share this with you. I'm going to be tuning on my TV because I'm on the local news the next 3 nights. Well, tonight, Thursday night, and Friday night, I'm being featured on the local news here in Tampa. So I'm going to go watch myself on TV as a psychic medium with my best friend on TV. That'll be interesting tonight.
That's absolutely incredible. I want to share with people where they can reach you as well. And this is the Social Psychic website here. So thesocialpsychic.com. I think it's also, we got it streaming the ticker there. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? What's the best way to sort of start a conversation?
Yeah, I will say this. I'm in the process of organizing I've been getting a lot of increased requests for reading. So I'm organizing that very shortly and having that handled. But the best way to reach out to me, go through my website. You can send me an email at the Social Psychic to the website. There's email links that you can click to go there. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. All my handles are the Social Psychic or Jason Zook. You could find me on most social media. My show, the Social Psychic radio show, is out there. Psychic Visions, a new show with Electrocast Media. We just got signed with them. That's going out there as well. And I have a third podcast that's called Let's Recognize Our Best, that features unsung heroes, mentors, academics, people who we recognize and appreciate. So that's going on as well. So
yeah, I think it's amazing. You have all these really awesome things that are opening up to you. And
thank you.
I want to wish you all the best, because I know that you have such good intentions. Like I said, I think you're just a really awesome human being, and I'm really glad that we were able to connect. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I deeply appreciate this opportunity. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to having you back on my show again in the near future.
That's awesome, man. Thanks again, Jason. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next show coming on Friday. Let's have a great night.
Have a great night. Thank you, sir.